Well, welcome to the final lecture series of, that we've been doing. And I had said the last time, there are many more topics that we would like to do, but not necessarily me, you know. So some of you out there probably could do one of these, you see, and it wouldn't have to be me, but there are endless topics a person could do. This one was particularly exhausting because we're talking 1991. Do you know how long ago that was? It's a long time, and I'm trying to remember, well, now, why did he do that? Or why didn't we do this? Or I can't remember. So this was challenging because it took a lot of research, and I had to call up a variety of people and bug them to refresh my mind. First, I want to say, besides welcome, everybody who was here has been here before. Someone who has been to one of these, any one of these. See, very good. See, look all those people you missed. That's very good. And then I always forget, but I should introduce our elected officials. So I know there are two of them here. So one of them is Katie Dunwell, who is right here. And one of them is in the back, but she's so shy. Carolyn Berry. And Carolyn Berry in the back. So they are both new to the city council, but they are both extremely excellent. And were you on the city council? No? Yeah?
Only for 9 years.
Yeah. So over there is Michelle is an ex city councilor like myself. She's an ex city councilor, as is Steve Benson. He was at one time a city councilor. Are there any other random elected officials?
Another former.
Oh, I didn't even see Susie come in, but yes, Susie Stevens is in the back. She also was a city councilor. So that's good. And then I didn't know if we had any other FOG 5 members. You didn't see anybody here who remembers FOG 5 or was a member of FOG 5? No, see, it's a mystery. So we can say anything we want.
They could be dead and gone.
Okay, so let's get on with this. I had mentioned this once before when people ask me about my most important accomplishments, but anyone might ask you what were your most important accomplishments, and I said it depends. What I'm proudest of, what I played an essential role in, what I worked the longest at, what I got the most recognition for, maybe, or what had the most long-term impact. And remember, I said on the last session, which was on water, that definitely number 5 for me would be the water treatment plant, even though most people wouldn't think of it. But for the long-term impact for the city, that absolutely is it. Most recognition for is probably the prison in Villebois. The top 3, however, I would say is Graham Oaks. And I say that with a little hesitancy because, as I will get into later, I'm wonder about number 1 lately because there are some things I think need to be addressed. But we'll get to that later. Maybe I'll inspire some people to do something. So what we're going to cover today is the Wilsonville being a tree city, and has been a tree city for a couple of decades, and of course Graham Oaks Natural Area, otherwise known as the Wilsonville Tract, through most of its history. And I'm going to cover these things: urban forestry, and then some background on Quercus garryana, which is the Oregon white oak, and then we'll talk about the Wilsonville Tract and Graham Oak's history and where we are now. If I have time, I have a few about the Wilsonville's heritage trees, but if we don't have time, it's not important. Someone else can do that on the next lecture series. So here's how this is a program I did maybe 25 years ago on urban forestry for Portland Urban Forestry Group. It was I had been to Paris, and there's Notre Dame, and there's some flying buttresses. And so I use this, I called this What We Choose to Save, because whether you're talking about old buildings or trees, there's almost always a choice involved. There's some choice to be made. And the way I looked at it was why we might need to remove a couple of those flying buttresses. The traffic engineers say we should. Safety standards have changed, and some of those buttresses are in the way. There's new bike or pedestrian standards that tell us we need to get rid of them. They extend too far into the right-of-way for new utility lines. Maybe they obstruct the visibility for our new gift shop. These are all the kind of reasons that people give for why they need to remove a tree. And I just remind people there's always a choice involved, because I don't think anyone will use one of these reasons to remove one of those flying buttresses. And I went on to say, here's another thing that applies to buildings as well as trees, why we don't need to worry about it, about removing a couple of them. There are still lots more buttresses on that building. What do we need that many for? After a while, no one will even notice. We're pretty sure it won't affect the rest of the building. And Paris has lots of other old buildings anyway, so not to worry. But you hear these kinds of things also about trees when they're in our way. So this is one of my examples. I know this tree is gone, this limb tree, whatever it was. This is the old Tech Xerox parking lot. But as you see, it sticks out into the driveway. And Tech was, and Xerox after them, were both very aggressive about preserving trees on their property. But I always got a kick out of this sign that they put on that limb rather than cut it off. Overhanging tree, go around it. So, yeah, with an arrow, in case you didn't. A little bit about where our particular situation with regards to trees. As you can tell, this is an old show of mine, because this is the house in the middle of the Ellickson property, which is now gone, and so is the barn. But trees are still there. And this is where you find old trees, especially here. You need to appreciate how different Wilsonville is than most of our neighbors, or certainly than Tualatin and Lake Oswego, West Lynn. These are hilly, lumpy places. And we are flat as a pancake. Once you come over out of the Tualatin watershed, the valley just lays flat. And that means that it was intensively farmed, and probably burned before the Europeans for oak savannas. The Native Americans burned the flatlands in order to harvest encourage production and harvest the acorns. But certainly for the last for 100 years, like from the 1850s to the 1950s, it was intensively farmed. And then for another 40 years, it was farmed. And it means that the trees you find left that are old are usually around some old home site, even if the home is gone. That's the reason there's a lump of trees out there. Oops. The other place you find them is on steep slopes and riparian edges. So we try to preserve those. There are usually trees left between the road and the field, or between one farmer's field and the neighbor's field. The fence line between two different property owners frequently is a place where no one bothered to take out the trees because they weren't plowing that. So that's where to look for them. Of course, these, the ones along the road, are in jeopardy because of those lines. Almost always along the road are coming power lines. And that's one of the things we have been in the city of Wilsonville. Can anybody know where that is? This is in Wilsonville. And almost all our lines are underground. Where are they not? Old Town. This is in Old Town. But you see what happens. This one is in Old Town, the fir that's been topped. Lots of problems with overhead lines. This is out by Graham Oaks on the way out of town. Because as you can probably see there, we have undergrounded everything on Wilsonville Road from border to border. Here's where they go back in, or back up. This is where they go under, and they come back out of the ground here. That's why you see all those pipes and blah, blah, spaghetti coming up. So too bad that tree grew in the wrong place. But anyway, that's what happens with power lines. And it's the reason that we have worked so hard. It's one of the reasons we've worked so hard over decades to get them gone. So this is Wilsonville Road. The wires are gone. And the other thing we have done over time is replace all of these traffic lights with arms instead of stringing them across with two poles on either side. So, it gives a very clean look, and it allows the trees to grow much more freely. But now here's some specific things. The Kinsman oak. This is before we undergrounded these power lines, as you can see. Here's the power lines over here that are not gone yet. But this tree we have worked hard for a long time to maintain. And one of the things was that when we put in the sidewalk, there didn't used to be a sidewalk on this side of Wilsonville Road. It has a big buttress root that's coming out right here. And it's the reason that the sidewalk, if you go there, goes up. It's a rise that goes up and over it. So we engineered this wall and this rise over it. And that's it this week. But the other thing that happened, here you can also see where we went up and over. We redid the curb and the storm drain and or manhole cover. And right now, I've been out there a couple of times with a number of arborists and engineers and you name it, because, oh yeah, everybody who was here for the water thing, what's going on here by the Kinsman Oak? The big pipe. The big pipe is going under this tree. It's going directly under this tree. And so they've had arborists assessing it, and geologists and hydrologists to see if we can get the big pipe under there. It's supposed to be 15 or 20 feet down, they think well below its root system. And the hydrologists are assuring us. Anyway, this is where they're digging up on the other side of it, up Kinsman, for the big pipe. But everybody's nervous about the Kinsman oak. It lost quite a few limbs in the ice storm, but seems to be pretty healthy otherwise. Here's a couple of the Canyon Creek oaks that same thing. You see where this one is? Too close to the road. So we made the sidewalk go around it. But ordinarily, if you don't have engineers and all of your planning departments who are working with a common goal, the engineer will just say that tree has to go. It's in the way of the sidewalk and the road right away. But we put it, our engineers were particularly crafty on a number of things to try to save especially oak trees. So here it is today. That was a 20-year-old picture. This is, both trees seem to be doing fine. And I will just say that they are doing fine, but they are also a demonstration of how canopy shy oaks are. These are two oaks that are in my yard, or they're actually not in my yard. They're in Park at Merrifield, the park at Park at Merrifield. But they're about 20 feet apart, and you see how canopy shy they are. This one won't go into this one's space, and that one won't go into that one's space. And if they were leafed out, they would look like one big tree with two trunks. And these trees, you can see, all the laterals are going out here. He's not sending any laterals the other direction. And they both tend to shy away from getting too close to their neighbor, whether it's an oak or something else. Here's the one at OIT. I used to call it the Fleer Oak or whatever, but now it's OIT owns that building, I think, or In Focus. Now I guess we could call it the Grace Chapel one, but here's another case where this one was very close to the street. It was already stressed to some degree, but decided we would give it a go anyway. You know, you're sometimes juggling, will it make it or not, and so on. But we did. You can tell when an oak is stressed sometimes by the amount of mistletoe in it. So you see these are mistletoe things. Good in Christmas, I guess. But same thing, we went around it and also made some attempt to keep the ground level the same as it was before we put the sidewalk in. We'll see that. So here's the Brown Road, Fir Grove, where you'll notice trucks occasionally hit this tree. But this is a case where we redesigned this whole road and turning thing with the church property and the sidewalk, and in order to save this one tree in this grove, because it's the corner, I don't know what you call that. It's like a buttress, that's because I'm looking at Notre Dame, I'm thinking of that. It's like a buttress for the whole grove, because it's facing southwest. It takes the storm right on, and it's the one that is way branched out. The others are back in there, have relatively small, little branching until you get way to the top. So we didn't want to lose the corner tree, and the engineers, this was an Eldon problem solving, came up with this plan so that the sidewalk would just stop. And we're not going to have the sidewalk go around there. And instead, we had the sidewalk go through the woods. So we cut off the corner. You know, it's a narrow corner like that. So we put a pathway through the woods so that we didn't have to have it next to that tree. And so that's how it's functioned ever since. This I consider one of my failures. I put down my accomplishments, so I have to mention some of my failures, and maybe the current city councilors will take this up. We failed, even though it was a city council goal for like 3 times running. to underground this stretch of brown. So you can see this is all, it's all undergrounded on Wilsonville Road, but here goes Brown Road, and you come around the corner and it's just a mess on Brown Road, on your way to Villebois if you're coming out that way. And it's especially a mess because it's got all that spaghetti stuff, because now it's going, after only a few poles, it's going underground again for Villebois. Because once you get to Villebois, everything is underground. Wilsonville Road is all underground. But this very short stretch of Brown Road is just a mess of overhanging stuff. It doesn't do any good for those street trees, which don't look very attractive anyway, but it also is just a mess of a pedestrian way. So I'm dropping a hint, because I know they have their goal setting coming up, but that was a fail on my part. I'll just quickly say benefits of trees: water quality, cool run, air quality, property values. Property values, there have been a lot of studies. Neighborhoods with more trees, they can just pick them out on an aerial photo. They're worth more. Sports, wildlife, let's see, cooling costs, beauty, etc. Okay, industrial things. Just to consider our industrial, I used to live in Northwest Portland, and where Nikolai is, in the far end, the industrial of Portland. There is not a tree to be had out there in Northwest Industrial Portland. And, but our industrial area has a lot of trees, and we not only have trees, we have pretty big trees for an urban setting. Because here's a street tree, that's the size of street trees. But as opposed to a residential neighborhood, this is an enormous building. This is the old Nike warehouse. Who's in it now? Pacific?
Yeah.
Yeah, I should ask you. You know all the business. He's the chamber rep here. Anyway, ordinary street trees are kind of inadequate in scale. And here's the other side of that warehouse with those trees. And we're still planting street trees on the other side of 95th. Same at 95th Avenue Industrial Center. Left a smattering of Doug fir, and they will get big. And then I want to say about being truck friendly. 95th Avenue is a truck friendly street because, and you go drive it sometime, but you'll see that there are no trees in the median anywhere along there. It's just one continual left turn lane. The sidewalk is curb tight. The trees are over here for most of it. Not over here because they have a bunch of existing trees, but that's the way it is so that it's comfortable for trucks. There's a bunch of other things, plus it's a concrete road. But here's Wilsonville Road, very unfriendly to trucks, and intentionally so, really from one end of the city to the other. And why is that? We don't really want trucks on Wilsonville Road. It's our commercial district. It's where the schools are, the library is, a lot of the neighborhoods. We don't want big trucks, and so this is what you do. See, it's just the reverse. So the trees are close to the road, and the pedestrians are protected away from the road. There's a median. Same thing. There's a median all the way down the middle with very short left turn pockets, not amenable to trucks. So this is some of the urban planning that you do and that you use trees to affect. It makes a very narrow field of vision, especially like at the high school, going by the high school, very narrow. It slows speeds down, and of course the trucks don't like it. Commercial issues, visual obstruction. So these are those beautiful little cherry trees at town center, but they just are in the wrong place because they obstruct the signage and always will. They will never get any taller. And they are beautiful in that entry over there where you turn in to go to Town Center Park, where they're in the middle and the sides of that. But when you put them out in the lot in front of the businesses, it's too obstructive for the business, and it will never correct itself. It's a case where for commercial visibility, bigger is better. This is the 7-Eleven over at Boones Ferry and Wilsonville Road. Well, there's a standard parking lot tree. You can't even see it. But this is another case where we worked really hard to save this tree and the other two big trees that are around that parking lot. When the parking lot and the road were redesigned, there was a lot of effort put into taking care of those trees. But here's another case. Bigger is better for commercial because you can limb them up and they're out of your way. Now, here's the Wilsonville High School oak, which is otherwise known as the Cumberland oak. But I went up there to see how it was doing. This is a 20-year-old photo, and it's not doing very well. It appears to be falling over. And the reason for that looks to me, because they have built this building extension out here. And I just talked to planning today about this. It's definitely got more lean than it did before. I don't know if it's on the building, but they've built a road underneath on top of the drip line, inside the drip line. And I guess that's all I had on that one. But anyway, they're going to look into it. The city's didn't know that it was in trouble because it's an iconic tree for the community, but for the high school especially. The Three Sister Oaks, they used to be at Laser Quick, then they moved over to Swire Coca-Cola. Oh, no, Coca-Cola moved in here. This is another case where you can see that the canopy shyness. They look like they're kind of interwoven, but they really aren't. If you took down this one in the middle, you'd have two half a trees, because this one's not going in there. And the one in the middle is kind of a fan-shaped tree, like that. So if you lost one on the end, it's going to be saluting off to the side. So those are fabulous trees. This is a more recent picture with that fence gone. And I guess I didn't get a picture of the trunk. Menor Graphics oak, I think that's one of our heritage trees. There's nothing important to say about it. Canyon Creek, the black walnut, and sequoia, but doesn't bother anyone. So I went to take a picture, but it's gone. The black walnut is gone. It was a heritage tree. It's been gone for a number of years, I think. So we need to correct that on the heritage tree thing. But, and it was a marginal tree when we tried to save it with the development of Canyon Creek and this park and the roads and et cetera. It was one of the iffy ones, and we thought, well, we'll give it a go, and but it only lasted 4 or 5 years. You don't know until 4 or 5 years after construction if a tree's going to make it. This is the old Burns Brothers parking lot where Target and Costco are. These are basically 25, 30-year-old trees, parking lot trees, and we didn't have good parking lot standards for trees when these were put in. Well, the city wasn't a city. We weren't incorporated when Burns Brothers went in. So they had been struggling the whole 30 years. So we didn't save a single one of those trees. They're all gone, but we put in much better parking lot trees in that parking lot. this is also that lot, and we decided we would make an attempt to save that oak and whatever was the best fir there. And so are you familiar with those? They're right there next to Target. They're snuggled up against the Target building, and they have this, we had to build this thing around them because, again, you know, some of them, you have to let them be in a hole. But in this case, we needed to build it up because you want to keep the drip zone the same height as it was before. And so there they are. This is a case where when I was looking at this, I thought, well, this oak is really snuggled right up into that fir. But when you really look at the structure of the oak, you can see that same thing. Its laterals won't go over there. They're over here. But they seem to be getting along fine. If you go up to Target, take a look at them. They have come through just fine. So here's the thing I like to point out about things. Most of our buildings last about 50 years. Not the Burns Brothers ones, quite a bit less. Damish, 40. You know, we don't keep our buildings very long, and certainly not in Wilsonville. And the lifespan of humans is, let's say, 100. That's given them a lot. Some of us make it there, but a lot of us don't. But then you have to put the perspective of what trees are, because here's the lifespan of a white oak. And we exist in this territory of our buildings and our lifespans. And if like the Burns Brothers lot, you're going to figure every 30, 40 years, we're going to cut down all the trees and put in all new trees. You will never get this. You will never see this tree because you cut it down in its adolescence. They just are living on a different time frame than we are, and you know, you have to take that into account. The other thing about Oregon white oak that you should know, it's native to Western Oregon. It grows really only between the San Juans and Southern Oregon, on the west side of the Cascades. It is specific to us. It likes wet winters. It likes really dry summers. Best way to kill them is to water them in the summer. They want to be dry in the summer. They're native to this part of Oregon. Wet winters, dry summers. They're slow growing and long living. So almost every other tree will outcompete them. And they really like sun. So if you want to have an oak that's big and healthy, you need to give it a chance. And we'll get to, and they're canopy shy, we covered that. They grow in really two different styles: savanna style, with the big canopy, and then oak grove or oak forest style. And and it depends on what their neighborhood looks like. So that's a savanna oak, the one out in Graham Oaks. I have to keep my eye on the clock here. There it is just this last week. I don't mean to say it looks bad, it just doesn't have leaves on it. You appreciate the structure more this time of the year. But the reason I took the picture is Metro put this fence around it because they didn't want people walking on the ground. But when I paced it off from out here, this is about a 60-foot diameter fence thing, 60 feet across. The canopy, as you can see, is probably 80 feet anyway. So that's what an oak needs to be a savanna oak. They develop massive trunks. You can't see her very well, but there's a grown-up person standing right here. That's their head. And they will develop these huge 40 inches or more diameter trunks. And 97, I read, was the record. The canopy width may exceed the height. And I have another picture there. That's one in Newburgh, or Yamhill County. Their canopy, when they're unobstructed, can just be enormous. In close quarters, excuse me, it develops into a tight oak grove or oak forest. And usually the stems are like nothing on them. They're just straight up stems with a little tuft at the top. And it's a fine habitat, although I would say this one is too tight. I'd go with more like this kind of spacing for a forest. But they will never turn into a savanna oak. They are committed to being this kind of oak. So that's my background on trees and oaks before we get into Graham oaks. But the history of the Wilsonville Tract. As I said, it was likely oak savanna before European settlement. It was farmed for 100 years, continued to be leased for farming after the state bought it. It was leased for farming for another 40 years. If you're not familiar with what we're talking about for the Wilsonville Tract, this is it. Here's Wood Middle School, Park at Merrifield. At the time, Damish Hospital, Living Enrichment Center or Callahan Center, and the sewage treatment plant. Eventually, this piece here is sold to the school district for Boone's Ferry School out of the Common Schools Fund. Anyway, just so you have an idea. Over the years, these are just some of the things that were proposed, and many of them fought a lot by the community. Oregon National Guard was going to do a military vehicle maintenance facility. Metro wanted to turn it into a landfill. I have the paperwork for that back there. Twice it was proposed as a women's prison. It was proposed for a golf course with residential development. And of course, if you remember from last time, Tualatin Valley Water District wanted to be the one to build a water treatment plant, and they wanted to build it there. And it was proposed for an arboretum, which most of us supported, most of the community supported, but it eventually went to Silverton, as you probably know, the Oregon Garden, because at the time we didn't have what? Water. And Silverton had a lot of water. Well, okay, there you go. Now, I put a whole slide in for you guys. Fog 5 was a little group, and you're probably wondering what it means. They organized themselves in '91 and were pretty active till around 2011, so about 20 years. It stands for Friends of Goal 5. And these are some of the people who first organized it, got it together. So the people who are here are Loretta Pickerel and Steve Benson. They're sitting right there. I thought I saw Lewis the other day, but maybe not. Anyway, they put this group together initially to protect the east side of Memorial Park from overdevelopment, because the parks plan at the time, I have one.
Oh, you did?
The parks plan at the time was thinking they would have pretty intensive athletic fields and parking and roads. And east side of Memorial Park is a lot of natural area and river frontage on the, you know. So that was the initial thing, and I kind of jumped into this group. They weren't organized when I got there, but not that I organized them, but but I was trying to protect the Wilsonville track, later Graham Oaks. And I thought, well, this is how I'll get some people. I'll just go commandeer these people and get them to, if I support their thing, maybe they'll support my thing. So that was sort of the beginning, and we put together Goal 5. Goal 5 is always has been the statewide land use planning goal, number 5, to conserve open space and protect natural and scenic resources. That's the shorthand version. There's a whole page of what it is, but this group did a lot of things besides all of the work on protecting Graham Oaks. We got a very advanced tree ordinance for the time, got Tree City status, significant resource overlay zone, so we protected a whole lot of other natural resource areas and creek sides and those sorts of things from development. The parking lot tree standards, bioswales, wetland. There were a lot of things that this group was weighing in on, and in the end, they ended up with multiple people on the city council, on the parks board, on the planning commission, and other boards. So they were very effective for that period of time in raising these issues to community awareness. Other people or major players in protecting the Wilsonville track. I would say at the top of the list, Jim McConnell, who was the science teacher at Wood Middle School. And he and I spent many hours traipsing around either just us or with a bunch of 7th graders. And so they're on there too, these Wood School students. And the Wood School students, they went and testified in Salem as 7th graders in 91, and they were back in 99 or 2001, out of high school. And they came back and testified again, who were now in college. So they were very effective and very committed to protecting the place. Jack Broom was early on very involved, so was Mike Hauk, Bob Carlson, who was involved with the Crest Center. And then a bunch of people, Charlie Seco played a critical role. The Clackamas County Commission came on board. The Westland School Board wrote letters. Senator Joyce Cohen, and then I know the treasurers are dropping off. This is the State Land Board. If you're not familiar with Division of State Lands, is controlled by the State Land Board. They are made up of 3 individuals, the governor, the Secretary of State, and the state treasurer. And we started out, because this went on for 10 years, we started out with Betty Roberts, Phil Kiesling, and Jim Hill. And we ended up with John Kitzhaber, Bill Bradbury, and Randall Edwards. A whole different bunch of decision makers for it. But all these people played roles of one sort and another. So here's kind of how it went, and I'll move this really fast. But the golf course was proposed in 91. That's what lit me on fire to try to get something done. I went with Jack Broom down to General Services Administration because they were going to sell it. And we said, no, you should just sell it out of state ownership because it belonged to mental health. And mental health didn't need it anymore. You should sell it to the Division of State Lands for the Common School Fund to benefit school children. And But it's not until 93 that they decide to purchase it for the Common School Fund for $52,000. This is 265 acres for 52,000. Then various things went on. There was a workshops. They released a request for proposal, Division of State Lands, for asking for what people would like to use or lease the Wilsonville tract for. Somewhere in that time, they also sold those 20 acres to the school district, and that was at a lower price because it was now Common School Fund land, and that's part of the mission. And then they adopted a management plan in 95 that was adopted by the land board. And this is when the reality hit us of after we had worked to get ownership by the Common School Fund, is that this is their goal, to maximize the dollars for the Common School Fund. And so it took us another 6 years to get it actually protected. DSL wanted to retain this centerpiece for speculation. They had sold this already, and so they thought this would be okay for Metro to have a park like this. And this piece, they should just hold on to. That's the best upland land. And it might be worth more someday. I mean, that's the land speculator in them. Anyway, it went on. And when we were, I have to say, Metro, when they stepped in, they had a bond measure that they included the Wilsonville tract in. It was a little bit sketchy how they did it, but we were very pleased that they got it in there as one of the target sites. And the bond measure passed by a huge measure in Wilsonville. But so then we think they're going to buy it from Division of State Lands, and in steps the prison debate, and darned if we aren't one of the 6 finalists for the women's prison in 96. Well, now that all went to the back burner because they had to wait until that was completed. It wasn't until 99 that TVWD withdrew their bid for it. In the meantime, they had appraisals done, and they were in this range. Remember what they bought it for? This is like a 3,000+% increase in 8 years or something. And furthermore, DSL wanted to assign the timber value at this amount of money for the standing timber that Metro wanted to buy for a park, that they should buy that standing timber, which they were never going to cut. It was, and we tried to say, well, how about you just keep ownership of it and promise not to cut it, and then we won't have to pay you for whatever. We had a showdown meeting with all those kids, the little ones and the college-age ones who came to the State Land Board, and they finally did settle at 1.8 and forgot about the $408,000 for the timber. And then later Wood School had a celebration. But this was a lot of fun. The governor was there, the Secretary of State, the state treasurer, all the kids from Wood School, and we did walks all over the place, and that was a fun time. Here's a picture of me somewhere in the middle of that when I was leading all these hikes and things. back when I was a child. Well, not really a child, but a lot younger. And me with Mike Burton. These were in the paper because I put a few articles over there on the table, which you're free to look through. But we were in the paper a lot, both the Oregonian and the, not me necessarily, but Friends of Goal 5, and were constantly writing letters. And there were articles about, it's about to go through. No, it's all collapsed. There's no deal. No, I think it's going to go. No, it was just back and forth for 10 years. We thought the prison thing was a long time, but really. So then it becomes, we do a name thing with Metro. So now it belongs to Metro. Metro proposes a name. I think it was like, what was it? Wilsonville Oaks or something, or it was a stupid name that that sounded like any other subdivision, you know, like Whispering Oaks or really, and yeah, Creekside Oaks. Yeah, sounds like a subdivision name, and so I suggested that why don't you name it after some historical figure from the area? So, I pitched this guy, John Wallace Graham, and because Graham's Ferry Road runs on the back side of the property, and of course he started Graham's Ferry and built Graham's Ferry Road, and so on and so forth. And so we had these buttons made like this. Oh, sorry, like this. And I have a couple of other descendants sitting here in the front row, because I am a descendant of his. I didn't mention it to Metro at the time, but that wasn't my name, so why would they care? He was an engineer. He was trained in Scotland, born and educated in Scotland. Came over here in the 1850s. But like that first one, when I said you have to, when we did this, I was not as alert to these kinds of things that you have to tell the whole story. So, or at least ask who's being left out. So I'm putting her in. This is his wife. Matilda Clementine, but she went by Clementine or Tiny, and Zumwalt. She was a Zumwalt. She was here, she crossed the plains as a 6-year-old in 1850. And it was her father who owned that land around Corral Creek and where Graham's Ferry was, and her father who gave them the land when she married him. So, and, you know, of course, it's called Graham's Ferry, and that was her married name, but he was an engineer, a civil engineer. He was off building the Oregon Electric Railroad line after the road, and she's home raising their 9 children and running the ferry across the Willamette. Well, he's off somewhere building a railroad. So it's not like she wasn't deeply involved in Graham's Ferry. So it's one of those things. Women often get short shrift in history because it carries his name. But there you go. Now, this is where I'll run through my critical piece. I took this picture, a really bad picture, off of one of the interpretive panels, many of which are falling apart out at Graham Oaks. If you zoomed in on this, you could see that the thing says Oak Savannah. The key, the legend, says Oak Savannah, and they're thinking this is the Oak Savannah. Well, as you can see, it's a bunch of lumps of trees. There's no savanna there. And so I wanted to remind people what an oak savanna looks like. This is an oak savanna in the southern part of the valley. That's kind of how they look. Here's another one. This is Eugene. They work to keep these savannas like this, which is to say they cut down the conifers, and because they will outcompete them. And they keep they mow it maybe once a year. So, how is Graham Oaks looking today? Have you been there lately? Here's just in the parking area. This is an oak tree. What are these things doing there? That's some crappy tree. No one wants to see that. I don't know what it is. I don't know trees. All I know is oaks. So, and over here, here's a nice, well, I'd say kind of nice oak tree. It's got a split trunk, it would appear to me. But what's this thing doing here? That's not an oak, and why would you plant it that close to that? This one is even worse. I apologize for my pictures. It was cloudy and I couldn't really get very good pictures. This is in the space in between in that median in the parking area. Go and look at this oak tree. It's got some silly street tree next to it, or maybe it's an alder or I don't know what. It's got 2 pines and another tree back here. How could this oak ever be anything? Why would you plant it that way? Wait a second. And the other ones, well, same thing. Well, we already did that one. Here is one. This is a nice tree. This is a good candidate to be a nice oak tree with a good full canopy and a straight trunk. They've got all of these pines. 4 pines that are going to be encroaching on that. How many feet does it need? At least 40 or 50. 60. And they've got all of these fast-growing pines. More situations. Why would you do that? Here's another decent oak, completely. And then you go out on Graham Oaks. What do they got? Oak trees that are planted about 1.5 feet apart, 2 feet apart. Have you seen a trunk of a grown oak tree? The trunk is going to be bigger than all 4 of these trees space way they are now. I have complained to them multiple times. Not complained, I've suggested. You know, I'm really a pleasant person. And that because now it's too late to transplant almost any of these. They're 15-year-old trees, and so you're just going to have to cut them down. And if they had done it 10 years ago, you could have transplanted them to another park or somewhere. You can take picture after picture. This is how they all are. They're planted in ridiculously tight clumps. This one might have a chance. Why is this little one here? And get rid of that one, for goodness sake. Same thing here. I won't. And then lots of them like this. Some other tree is also growing in there. Not an oak at all. And then we have the pines versus the oaks. It is way overplanted in pine. And the trouble with that is, look how much they outgrow them. These are 2 different cases. Here's the oak, here's the pine, planted at the same time. Same thing here. Here's an oak, here's a couple of pines. No doubt all planted at the same time. This tree is going to way outrun it. as would a Doug fir or almost any other thing. And then when you're thinning, you need to look at, this is a bad candidate because it's got a split crotch. And so it's going to always be susceptible to breakage. This is a good candidate, has nice branching, good laterals, nice single trunk, whatever. Then they have all this area, the forest part, where they're planted in rows, like it was a nursery. Yeah. And they're like 18 inches apart. Anyway, there you go. I don't need to bore you, but it's just a shame. I will end with these. This is a good open canopy candidate here, next to the bird blind, which used to overlook the pond, which is gone. So it's a bird blind so you could watch these waterfowl, but not there anymore. Why? Because they've completely overplanted it with all this shrubs. And here's another one. Here, this is like the best one I could find. Here's a good candidate. It's a nice structured tree. It has plenty of room and no pine trees. So, but it's the only one. So that's it. I'm at the question-y part.
Who are the they and the them who planted these?
Metro. I just don't know. I am mystified. Do they not have an arborist on staff with all of the natural areas? Not like this is their only one. They have them all over the place.
Hey, Charlotte, I have a couple questions for you. First of all, what is the age of the Graham oak? Do you know?
Oh, that
Just an
one? I
estimate,
would
yeah.
say it's around 200.
Okay. Wow, wow.
Yeah,
It is.
so it's not even halfway through its life.
Yeah. And then second, you talk about the issues with Metro, and they're obvious. But because the park is owned by and controlled by Metro, what voice does Wilsonville have other than to very nicely suggest that they make changes?
Nag, 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 nag. I don't really know the answer to that. I've talked to different people at Metro. Some seem a little bit interested. They have a thing on the side of the restrooms there that says, we're involved in thinning for an oak savanna. Well, I haven't seen any indication.
I've actually talked to Metro too about the decay of the placards.
Yeah, the interpretive panels.
We're going to replace, but they continue to decay. And the last conversation I had with them was over a year ago.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I don't know, because one of the past employees, of course you could ask Julie, the mayor, who sort of semi-works for Metro, but she works for the zoo, which is owned by Metro. But other people who are part of the net, who are since retired, they're like old like me, part of original acquisition of this, they said Metro has lots of funds for maintenance of these areas. Funds are not an issue at the moment, but I don't know.
I just wanted to ask about the changes that are going on ecologically at present. I play golf, and I noticed that Sandalese pines are just about all dying.
Oh, yeah.
And the spruces are having trouble too. And I'm wondering if our species of oak is going to continue to thrive as the climate changes, or are we going to become, have to import, say, Northern California oaks or something in order to keep going?
I don't know. Remember when California was having so much trouble with sudden oak death, or sudden death of their oaks, sudden oak death of the California live oaks and other oaks in California. it never impacted Oregon white oak, and still doesn't. It's a fungus that they're not impacted by. So that's why I don't think the California ones will be moving up here. In fact, they were trying to keep them out because of that fungus, because of the sudden oak death. But I don't know the answer to that. I would be happy to get rid of 3/4 of the pine trees out there. So.
I'm from Northeast Portland, where we were blessed with tons of older trees, but, there was no oversight or recommendations at the time when they were planted. So is Wilsonville doing privately held or street trees a little bit differently? In Portland, if it's a street tree, the closest owner is responsible for the pruning and maintenance of it, which is one of the reasons why I think it fails. But is Wilsonville going to try to do that differently so that other trees can prosper?
Wilsonville, if you could go from neighborhood to neighborhood and see how we've evolved in that regard. The first neighborhoods, like Montebello, was one of the very first neighborhoods after Wilsonville was incorporated. It had a terrible experience with trees, and they were mostly street trees, but they were required, but they were planted in people's yards, not in a planting strip, because they didn't have a planting strip. They had curb-tight sidewalks, as does Merrifield, built much later. The trees are all in the yard, which is a bad idea. But in Montebello, they also just planted any old trees, because the developer plants them. And there weren't rules on what you were supposed to plant for a street tree. And so they ended up with these giant, like sequoias, in a little tract house of a yard, and it was lifting up the house. And so the homeowners would go through and cut them down, and then pretty soon there's no trees in Montebello, or hardly any. So that was a disaster. And then Park at Merrifield, which is where I live, they were a little better, but not much. And now, same thing. People get annoyed with a tree in their yard if it's too big or whatever, drops things they don't want dropped in their yard, and they cut them down, and they don't understand that they're really a street tree, that's really a street tree. So you drive through a place like Montebello, and you see lots of missing street trees. Now, we just had a street tree survey done last year, or in the last couple of years, before the ice storm. 2 years ago, before the ice storm, which was helpful. And part of the tree ordinance is designed to, you have to go get a tree permit and fill it out and say what kind of tree and what size it is, and why you're taking it out. You can take out up to 3 trees, and we can't stop you, but we want to know. So I'm not elected official anymore, but the city wants to know why that tree didn't work out. Is it because it was planted in the wrong place? Is it because it was the wrong species? Is it what? Those purple leaf plums turned out to be disastrous, and Parkwood Estates, I think, had them just almost all over the place, and then they all up and got a disease and died at the same time. So lots of things like that you learn over time, and I don't know with the city of Portland if there's that difference as you look at neighborhoods as their arborist programs evolve and get better. And
They have a list. You have to, if you want to plant a tree, if you're under wires, it can only be this kind of trees.
Yeah.
But one of the questions is the onus on the homeowner to have to maintain and prune and take care of those huge street trees that can be a huge cost.
Yeah.
And then in our HOA, it's kind of funny to see how different people have taken care of their tree or not.
Oh, right.
You know, and we had a ton of ice damage during, 2 years ago
In Wilsonville?
in our HOA in Wilsonville.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your HOA?
The Meadows.
Oh, Meadows, yeah. Well, it's an excellent question. I don't have all the answers for it, but yeah.
I noticed over, I think it's at Graham Oaks, at Coyote Way, that trail.
Yeah.
Looks like they've cut down a number of pines or conifers.
Oh, did
not
they?
sh- yeah.
I didn't go out there. I only had a couple of days to go through and take pictures and
They cleared about 60% of the trees.
on Coyote Way.
Quite a few.
Yeah. Well, they had told me early on when I raised the issue of them being too dense, they said, well, they expect a 60% die-off. And then when they had virtually no die-off, then they said, well, it's too upsetting to the public if we cut them down. And, there was always a reason, see? And then probably they started dying because they're so crowded. Because honest to goodness, those rows, they put in rows and rows and rows of way too tight of trees. I mean, it was like a nursery. If you're talking about a nursery and you're going to take them out of the ground when they're like this big, then you could plant them really tight. But not 10, 15 years later. So anyway, what else was I going to mention? So I don't really have anything else. I could run through my 6 slides really fast. If you just want to know what our heritage trees are, we have 3 state heritage trees. Do you want to know how many Portland has? 3. We have as many as the city of Portland. One is the Steinbouger Walnut Orchard in Marassi Park. It is the state heritage trees. It's a very rigorous thing to get that designation. It has to be a statewide significance, and this is to demonstrate the boom-bust cycle of walnuts in the 20th century, because this is one of the last stands that's reasonably healthy that you could find. The cable trees on the Willamette, if you go down there, these tell the story of when they used to cable log rafts up to the bank. So we have several, most towns on the Willamette have them, but ours are in Memorial Park and accessible to the public. So we were picked to demonstrate the cable trees on the Willamette, where they still have, these are buried cables in the tree, and these are cable scars on the river. And then the RV short fir tree, which is, this is wood school, so you see it sticks up a lot. It's on a hill and it's way taller and wasn't logged when everything was logged. RV Short was he was a state legislator, but he was also, a surveyor. And so the assumption is his house was here, and he left that as a survey marker, because you can see it from all over the place. So that's the RV short tree. And then the city has a bunch of them. You can see these on the city's website. We have 9, not a bunch, but 9. This one is over at the Frog Pond Church. This is the Cumberland Oak at the high school. I think it's going down, but I could be wrong. The Sue Guyton Grove is in Old Town. Lowry's Marketplace Grove, that's the one I ran through the school pictures with. How in that case the buildings are gone, trees still there. The next building comes and goes. The next building comes and goes. I mean, it really shows you how you have to protect the tree through many building cycles. There's the RV short fir is also it was a city tree before I nominated it for the state. Frank Locklear Grove is the trees in front of the library here. Probably ought to be thinned. What you think? I don't know. I haven't really looked around. The Colby sequoia is on the east side of Memorial Park. This is the black walnut I was saying is gone in Canyon Creek Meadows. And what's the last one? This is the one at Mentor Graphics. But we accept, someone accepts nominations. The city has nomination sheets for heritage trees, and we're not nearly as rigorous as the state. There are a couple that I would like to see get on the city's list. One is the one at the other end of Baskin and Robbins that is an enormous tree. I don't know what it's some kind. It's not a fir, but it's a conifer. But I don't know what it is. Not a Doug fir. And then Hank Hummelt has nominated that one because his office is right next to it. And then one of those giant magnolias in Old Town on 5th Street, I think, or both of them, one or both. But if you have good ideas for a city heritage tree, it can be just that it's a spectacular tree, or it can be that it has an important history, or it's a unique tree, or it can be a number of different qualifiers for it. So, yeah.
Charlotte, I was just going to say, you don't have the Three Sister Oaks.
Oh, it isn't there, is it? Because the Three Sister Oaks is we had those little girls came. Were they your girls?
No.
No, I'd be embarrassed. But that's right. They came to City Council and did a whole presentation for the Three Sister Oaks. So that is a heritage tree, but it's not on the city's website. We'll have to get that black walnut off and stick the Three Sisters on. But there's no limit to how many you can have for city trees, because Portland has like 350 Portland heritage trees. They'll take anything. But only 3 that qualify at the state level. So.
Hey Charlotte, since I have a mic, I can ask a question without anyone.
Okay.
Are you aware enough of the threat to the ash trees to speak on it a little bit and let people know what's going on there?
I really am not, but maybe one of the city councilors is. I'm not. Because they've had presentations about it, right?
Yeah. You'll be hearing more about it, and I won't go into too much detail because I don't know a lot of the details, but our Parks and Rec staff and our Natural Resources staff is mitigating a bug called emerald ash borer that has basically arrived in the United States within the last several years, and once they arrive, they take over the oak tree, or they take over the ash trees and basically kill them within a period of 3 to 10 years. So what the city's doing now is figuring out how to mitigate that problem with some replanting and some just keeping an eye on them to find out what that life cycle is going to look like and how they're going to mitigate that problem.
Have they been detected here?
They have been detected in Oregon, yes. But not
In Oregon, but not
most of
here.
them.
Forest Grove is the closest that they've found them, but that's not too far for a bug to get. Ash trees grow in natural areas a lot in wetland areas or around wetland areas. So they're not common for street trees, but.
Charlotte, I have a quick question about the large tree on tubes by Villa Bois, the side.
Oh, I meant to say that one, but I forgot about it. Yeah.
I was asking about the large tree. I think it's an oak.
It's a red oak.
It's a red oak on twos because the the sidewalk actually goes around the tree, and it seems like it changed how
Yeah, it did.
you enter Villebois.
They were going to cut that down, and the city council had, I should include that in there. The city council had decided to allow the developer to take it down because they were increasing the size of Two's Road, and there was going to be that driveway and those houses, and they were going to take the red oak down. And I wasn't there when they approved it to go down, and when I found out about it, I got them to call it up again. And it came back up for discussion, and once again, once you light a fire under them, the engineers, they can fix almost any problem. They redid the design of the entry and of Two's Road so that the developer was able to get an additional house out of there, and it gave a nice entry, a significant entry for the entry to his development there. So it came out just fabulous. But if you don't raise the issue and get the planners and engineers inspired to do something, then it's just easier to say, well, the line goes through here and it's on the wrong side of the line, so there it goes. But yeah, that's an important one. That's a big, it's not that old. It's only about 70 years old, but it's huge. Red oaks are fast-growing oaks as opposed to white oaks.
Thanks.
So, I don't have any more things. Do you?
That's it. The series then has concluded. Thank you so
Concluded.
much.
There